The message came from deep space, crackling through the void like the dying breath of a star. Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Council leaned forward in his command chair, his four eyes focusing on the holographic display that flickered before him. The transmission was old, very old, and it carried the distinct energy signature of the Sol system. "Play it again," he ordered, his voice a low rumble that made the bridge crew of different alien species tense slightly. The hologram shimmered and reformed, showing the ghostly image of a tall, thin being with large eyes and pale skin. The creature's mouth moved, but the words that came out were not in any language the Council's computers could translate immediately. "Warning," the translation finally appeared in glowing text below the image. "The Earthborn Titan sleeps in the third world of the yellow star. Do not wake what should not wake. We are the Watchers. We have seen what comes when the giant stirs. The stars themselves will tremble." The message repeated 3 times before dissolving into static. Admiral Zethkar's tail, thick and scaled like that of an ancient reptile, swished behind his chair. In annoyance, "How old is this transmission?" he asked the ship's communication officer, a floating jellyfish-like creature whose translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "Our analysis suggests it is at least 50,000 Earth years old." "Admiral," the officer replied through the universal translator embedded in its biology, "the energy decay patterns indicate it was sent from somewhere in the outer reaches of the Sol system." Zethkar made a dismissive sound deep in his throat. "Ancient superstitions. The Sol system is nothing but a backwater collection of rocks orbiting a mediocre star. What could possibly be threatening about it?" The Admiral was not wrong to think this way. The Galactic Council had been watching the Sol system for thousands of years, and it had always been unremarkable. The third planet, Earth, showed signs of primitive life that had slowly crawled out of the oceans and eventually developed basic tools. Nothing special. Nothing that could threaten an advanced galactic civilization, but the messages kept coming. Not frequently, but regularly enough that the Council's archives had collected dozens of similar warnings over the millennia. All spoke of something called the Earthborn Titan and the danger of awakening it. The messages came from different sources, different locations, but they all pointed to the same system. Dr. Velthara, the Council's chief synorchiologist, had studied these transmissions for decades. She was a being of pure energy, existing in a containment field that glowed soft blue, and her research into ancient civilizations was considered the best in the galaxy. "Admiral," she said, her voice like the sound of wind through crystal caves, "I believe these warnings deserve more attention than we have given them. The beings who sent them called themselves the Watchers. We have found traces of their civilization throughout this part of the galaxy, always in ruins, always abandoned." "And what happened to them?" Zethkar asked, though his tone suggested he was not really interested in the answer. "They vanished," Dr. Velthara replied, "all at once approximately 47,000 years ago. Every single one of their worlds shows signs of rapid evacuation. No signs of war, no natural disasters that we can detect. They simply left." The Admiral's tail continued to swish. "Probably fled from some plague or natural disaster. Ancient aliens and their mysterious disappearances are not my concern. My concern is the expansion of the hegemony and the security of Council space." The hegemony was the military arm of the Galactic Council, and under Zethkar's command it had been growing more aggressive in recent decades. New worlds were being brought into the Council's influence, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. Resources were always needed to fuel the great machine of galactic civilization. "Speaking of expansion," Zethkar continued, turning to his tactical officer, "what is the current status of the Sol system? Any changes since our last survey?" The tactical officer, an insect-like being with multiple arms that moved constantly over his control panels, clicked his mandibles before responding. "Actually, Admiral, there have been some interesting developments. The primitive species on the third planet has recently achieved faster-than-light travel." This got Zethkar's attention. His head snapped toward the tactical display, which now showed a three-dimensional map of the Sol system. Several small blips indicated spacecraft moving between the planets. How recently? The Admiral asked. Their first successful FTL test was conducted approximately 6 Earth months ago. They have since established a small outpost on one of their gas giant's moons and have sent exploration vessels to nearby star systems. Zethkar studied the display with interest. A species achieving FTL travel was always significant. It meant they were ready for contact with the greater galactic community, whether they knew it or not. What do we know about them? He asked. The tactical officer's arms danced over his controls, bringing up images of humans going about their daily lives on Earth. They call themselves humans. Bipedal, carbon-based, relatively short-lived by galactic standards. Average lifespan of about 80 of their years. They appear to be an aggressive species with a history of warfare among themselves, but they have recently unified under a single planetary government. Physically? Zethkar inquired. Weak, the officer replied bluntly. No natural armor, no claws, no venom. They compensate with tools and technology, but even their technology is primitive by our standards. Their fastest ships can barely achieve 1/10 of standard galactic velocity. The Admiral leaned back in his chair, considering. And they originate from the same system mentioned in these ancient warnings? Dr. Velthara's energy field pulsed brighter. Yes, Admiral. The third planet of the Yellow Star. The same world. The Watchers called the resting place of the Earthborn Titan. Coincidence, Zethkar said firmly. A primitive species achieving FTL travel is not unusual. It happens every few centuries. The fact that they come from a system mentioned in ancient myths means nothing. But even as he said it, something in the back of the Admiral's mind felt unsettled. In his long career, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were telling him to pay attention. Initiate first contact protocols, he ordered. Send a diplomatic vessel to the Sol system. Let us see what these humans are like. 3 weeks later, the GCS Harmony dropped out of FTL space at the edge of the Sol system. Captain Mortal, a peaceful being from a species known for their diplomatic skills, commanded the sleek vessel as it moved inward toward the third planet. The first contact went better than anyone had expected. The humans, despite their primitive technology, proved to be eager to join the galactic community. They were curious about other species, excited to learn, and surprisingly adaptable to new concepts. Captain Mortal found himself genuinely liking the human representatives who came aboard his ship. They were led by a woman named Ambassador Sarah Chun, who had an infectious enthusiasm for everything she saw. "This is incredible," she said as Mortal gave her a tour of the ship's diplomatic quarters. "We always wondered if we were alone in the universe. To discover that there are thousands of species, entire civilizations spanning the galaxy. It's like a dream come true." Mortal's translator conveyed his gentle pleasure at her reaction. His species communicated primarily through subtle changes in their skin color, but the humans seemed to appreciate his attempts at what they called smiling. "Your species will be welcome in the council," he assured her. "Though, of course, as a newly contacted civilization, you will begin with limited membership. A small colony world in the outer territories, perhaps some mining rights in your home system." Ambassador Chun's smile faltered slightly. "Mining rights in our home system?" "Of course," Mortal said, not noticing her change in tone. "The Sol system has significant untapped resources. Your asteroid belt alone could supply raw materials for dozens of worlds. And the gas giants have rare isotopes that are quite valuable. But thus is our home," Chun said carefully. "These are our planets, our resources." Mortal's skin shifted to a pattern that the translator interpreted as confusion. "Naturally, you would receive fair compensation for any resources extracted. The Council is not unreasonable. But you must understand, as a newly contacted species, you lack the technology and infrastructure to properly utilize these resources yourselves." The conversation continued for several more hours, but Captain Mortal could sense that something had changed in the human ambassador's demeanor. She remained polite, but the enthusiasm had dimmed. When the diplomatic vessel finally left the Sol system, carrying with it a formal invitation for humanity to join the Galactic Council, Mortal felt that the meeting had been successful, if not quite as warm as it had started. Back on Earth, Ambassador Chun's report to the United Earth government was received with mixed emotions. The discovery of galactic civilization was everything humanity had hoped for, but the implications were troubling. "They see us as children," Chun explained to the assembled council of Earth's leaders. "Primitive beings who need to be guided and managed. They're offering us a small colony world at the edge of their territory and limited access to our own solar system." President Maria Santos, a stern woman who had led Earth through the difficult years of planetary unification, frowned at the report. "What are their military capabilities?" "Vastly superior to ours," Chun admitted. "Their diplomatic vessel alone could probably destroy our entire space fleet. They have weapons that can crack planets and ships the size of cities." "And if we refuse their generous offer?" asked General Harrison, Earth's military commander. They didn't say explicitly, but the implication was clear. Join the council on their terms or be brought in by force later. The room fell silent as the leaders of humanity contemplated their situation. They had reached for the stars only to discover that they were already claimed. President Santos finally spoke. "We accept their offer. For now, but we continue building our defenses and expanding our capabilities. If we're going to be the youngest species at the galactic table, we need to prove we deserve a seat." None of them knew that deep beneath Earth's oceans, in places where the pressure would crush any human body and the darkness was absolute, ancient systems had begun to detect the presence of alien vessels in their solar system. These systems had been sleeping for 50,000 years, waiting for a threat that required their activation. And in the deepest parts of the Earth's core, something vast and patient stirred ever so slightly, like a giant awakening from a very long dream. 6 months after first contact, Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought called Galactic Supremacy. Around him, the largest invasion fleet in hegemony history prepared for what military planners called Operation Solar Harvest. The decision to invade had not been difficult to make. Humans had proven to be stubborn negotiators, demanding equal treatment and full rights to their home system. Such defiance from a primitive species could not be tolerated. If other newly contacted civilizations saw humans getting special treatment, it would set a dangerous precedent. "Fleet status report," Zethkar commanded, his 4 eyes scanning the tactical displays that showed hundreds of warships arranged in perfect formation. "All vessels ready, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. 412 capital ships, 800 support vessels, and 200,000 ground troops. The human fleet consists of 37 small vessels, none larger than our escort ships. Zethkar's tail swished with satisfaction. "This will be over quickly. Send the ultimatum." Minutes later, every communication device on Earth received the same message. Admiral Zethkar's imposing figure appeared on screens across the planet, his translator converting his words into dozens of human languages. "People of Earth," he began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "the Galactic Council has lost patience with your unreasonable demands. You will surrender your military vessels immediately and accept Council governance of your system. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. You have one Earth, hour to comply." In the United Earth Government headquarters in Geneva, President Santos watched the message with her military commanders. General Harrison's face was grim as he studied the tactical reports coming in from Earth's orbital sensors. "How many ships?" Santos asked. "Over 1,000, Harrison replied. "Each one of their main battleships could destroy our entire navy. We have maybe 100 functional warships, and most of those are converted civilian vessels." "What about the orbital defense platforms?" "Operational, but they're untested against this level of firepower. Mr. President, we cannot win this fight with conventional weapons." Santos closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 7 billion lives resting on her shoulders. then we fight with unconventional ones. Activate the Deep Earth Protocol? The Deep Earth Protocol was humanity's most classified project, born from strange discoveries made during the construction of geothermal power stations. Deep drilling operations had uncovered chambers filled with technology that was clearly not human in origin. The artifacts were ancient beyond measure and completely inert, but they had been carefully studied and mapped. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading expert on the alien artifacts, had spent years trying to understand their purpose. She was a small woman with graying hair and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. The artifacts are definitely connected to the planet's core, she had reported to the government months earlier. We've traced energy conduits running through the Earth's crust like a vast nervous system. Whatever these things are, they're designed to interface with the planet itself. Now, as alien warships filled Earth's orbit, Dr. Vasquez found herself in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, standing before the largest artifact chamber ever discovered. The room was filled with crystalline structures that pulsed. With faint internal light, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly. "Are you certain this will work?" President Santos asked through the communication link. "I'm not certain of anything," Dr. Vasquez admitted. "But our analysis suggests these artifacts respond to human bioelectric fields. When our researchers made physical contact with them, we detected massive energy spikes throughout the entire network." "What kind of energy spikes?" "The kind that could power entire cities or destroy them." Santos took a deep breath. "Do it." Dr. Vasquez approached the central crystalline structure, a towering formation that resembled a twisted tree made of living light. As her hand touched its surface, the crystal erupted in brilliant illumination that spread through the chamber. Like wildfire. Above, in Earth's orbit, the hegemony fleet had completed its deployment. Admiral Zethkar was pleased with the formation. His ships surrounded the planet completely, their weapons aimed at population centers and military installations. "Time remaining?" he asked. 15 minutes until the deadline expires, Admiral." "Any response from the humans?" "None, sir. Their orbital stations remain active, and we're detecting increased activity around their military bases." Zethkar's 4 eyes narrowed. "Foolish. Begin targeting procedures. If they want to be destroyed rather than enslaved, we will accommodate them." That was when the first anomaly occurred. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, tectonic sensors registered something impossible. The Earth's mantle was moving in ways that violated every law of geology. Massive convection currents suddenly shifted direction, and the planet's magnetic field began to fluctuate wildly on the bridge of the galactic supremacy. Instruments started reporting readings that made no sense. The gravity well around Earth was changing, subtly but measurably. Navigation computers began issuing warnings about gravitational anomalies. "What is happening?" Zethkar demanded. His science officer, a many-tentacled being whose species was renowned for their analytical abilities, worked frantically at his instruments. "Admiral, we're detecting massive energy discharges from within the planet itself. The source appears to be distributed throughout the entire planetary structure." "Weapons systems?" "Unknown, sir. The energy signature doesn't match any known technology." At that moment, every human on Earth felt something they would later struggle to describe. It was as if the planet itself had taken a deep breath. The sensation lasted only seconds, but it left everyone with the unmistakable feeling that something fundamental had changed. In the artifact chamber, Dr. Vasquez stumbled backward as the crystal formation she had touched erupted in light so bright it should have blinded her. Instead, she found she could look directly at it without discomfort. More disturbing, she could understand what she was seeing. The crystals were not just artifacts. They were neurons in a vast artificial brain that used the entire planet as its substrate. The continents were processing centers, the oceans were cooling systems, and the core itself was a massive quantum computer that had been running calculations for millions of years. "Oh God," she whispered, "Earth isn't just our home. It's alive." The revelation came with knowledge that flooded her mind like water through a broken dam. The Watchers had not built this system. They had found it, already ancient beyond measure, and recognized its purpose. Earth was a weapon designed by some unimaginably advanced civilization to be the ultimate planetary defense system, but it required something the Watchers could not provide. It required a biological component, a species that could serve as its consciousness and guide its actions. The Watchers had tried to fill this role, but their biology was incompatible. So they had done something else instead. They had seeded Earth with the genetic building blocks needed to evolve a compatible species. Humanity was not just Earth's dominant life form. Humanity was Earth's intended pilot. Above the planet, Admiral Zethkar's confidence was rapidly turning to concern. His ship's instruments were reporting increasingly disturbing readings. The space around Earth was becoming unstable, with gravitational anomalies appearing and disappearing seemingly at random. "Admiral," his communication officer reported, his voice tight with worry, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It's not coming from any human facility we can identify. Put it through." The view screen flickered and displayed something that made several members of the bridge crew step backward in fear. It was a human face, but not quite human. The features were familiar, but the eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. And when the figure spoke, its voice resonated with harmonics that suggested vast spaces and deep time. "You were warned," the figure said simply. "The Watchers told you not to wake what sleeps here, but you did not listen." Zethkar forced himself to stand straighter. "I am Admiral Zethkar of the Galactic Hegemony. Surrender immediately or face destruction." The figure on the screen tilted its head slightly, and for a moment its expression almost seemed sympathetic. "You do not understand what you have done. For 50,000 years, Earth has slept, waiting for its children to mature enough to guide it. You have forced that awakening before we were ready. Children?" Zethkar snarled. "You are a primitive species barely capable of leaving your own planet." "We are more than we appear," the figure replied. "We are the dreams of a sleeping god. And you have just woken it from its rest." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the galactic supremacy in tense silence. Zethkar stared at the blank screen, his tail lashing behind him with increasing agitation. "Status of the fleet?" he demanded. "Holding position, but ... The tactical officer hesitated. "Admiral, several ships are reporting instrument malfunctions. Gravity sensors are giving impossible readings, and our positioning systems are having difficulty maintaining stable orbits." "Begin the attack," Zethkar ordered. "Whatever trick they are playing, it ends now." The Hegemony fleet opened fire with enough concentrated energy to crack continents. Thousands of particle beams and plasma bolts lanced toward Earth's surface, targeting military installations and population centers with surgical precision. None of them reached their targets. Instead, the incoming fire simply ... stopped, the energy beams dissipated into harmless light, and the plasma bolts cooled to nothing, as they encountered something that should not have existed. Space itself around Earth had become defensive, redirecting attacks and absorbing destructive energy as if the vacuum possessed intelligence. On Earth's surface, people stared up at the sky where impossible aurora displays painted the atmosphere in colors that had no names. The planet's magnetic field had become visible, forming vast geometric patterns that pulsed with inner light. Dr. Vasquez, still connected to the crystal network, felt Earth's consciousness expanding around her like a vast, patient presence waking from sleep. Through the network she could sense every living thing on the planet, from the smallest bacteria to the great whales in the deepest oceans. All of it was part of something larger, something that had been waiting for this moment for millions of years. But the awakening was not without cost. She could feel the strain it was putting on the planet's systems and on humanity itself. People around the world were beginning to experience strange symptoms, enhanced reflexes, sudden understanding of complex physics, and an inexplicable connection to the planet's rhythms. In Earth's orbit, the Hegemony fleet found itself fighting an enemy that defied every tactical doctrine they knew. Their weapons were useless, their navigation systems were failing, and space itself seemed to be turning against them. Admiral Zethkar watched his tactical displays with growing horror as ships began to report that they were being pulled off course by gravitational forces that appeared and disappeared without warning. 3 destroyers had already collided with each other when their navigation systems failed simultaneously. "Retreat," he ordered finally. "Pull the fleet back to a safe distance." But as his ships attempted to withdraw, they discovered that retreat was not an option. The space around Earth had become a maze of gravitational anomalies and energy fields that trapped vessels attempting to leave. They were caught in an invisible web that tightened with every passing moment. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, ancient systems that had slept for eons continued their awakening. In chambers scattered across the planet, crystalline networks hummed with increasing power. The planet's core spun faster, generating magnetic fields of incredible strength, and in the depths of the oceans, where the pressure was crushing and the darkness absolute, massive structures began to rise from trenches that had hidden them for millions of years. Structures that were part technology, part biology, and entirely beyond human understanding. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was becoming something else, something that had been designed to defend not just itself, but the entire solar system against any threat. The Earthborn Titan was stirring, and across the galaxy, sensitive instruments began to detect gravitational waves that carried a message older than civilization itself. The sleeping giant had awakened, and the stars themselves trembled at its rousing. 3 days after the failed invasion, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stood in the cockpit of her fighter ship, staring at instruments that made no sense anymore. The readings showed her exact position in space, the gravitational fields of nearby planets, and the energy signatures of every ship within 1,000 kilometers. The problem was, her instruments were completely dead. She was seeing all of this information directly. Somehow, knowing it the same way, she knew which direction was up or down. When she moved her hands toward the flight controls, the ship responded before she even touched them, as if it could read her intentions. "Control, this is Phoenix 1, she spoke into her communication system. "Something is very wrong with my ship." The voice that answered belonged to Captain Rodriguez, her squadron leader. "Define wrong, Mitchell. Your ship appears to be operating perfectly from our sensors." "Sir, my instruments are offline, but I can navigate better than ever before. I can feel the gravitational pull of Mars from here, and we're still in Earth orbit. I know the exact position of every alien ship in the system without looking at any displays." There was a long pause before Rodriguez responded. "Mitchell, return to base immediately. Report to medical for evaluation." But Sarah Mitchell was not alone in her strange experience. Across Earth and throughout the human ships scattered around the solar system, people were discovering abilities that should not have existed. Pilots found they could navigate by instinct through the most complex space maneuvers. Engineers began understanding alien technology just by looking at it. Soldiers moved with reflexes that seemed impossibly fast. Dr. Elena Vasquez, still connected to the crystal network deep beneath the Swiss Alps, was experiencing the most dramatic changes of all. Through her link to Earth's awakened consciousness, she could perceive the entire solar system as if it were a single living organism. She watched the trapped hegemony fleet like a doctor might observe bacteria under a microscope. More disturbing, she could feel what was happening to humanity itself. The awakening of Earth's defense systems had triggered changes in human DNA that had been dormant for thousands of years. Genetic switches were activating, unlocking capabilities that the Watchers had carefully engineered into the human genome millions of years ago. "President Santos," she spoke through the communication link, her voice carrying new harmonics that seemed to resonate from the Earth itself. "We need to talk. All of humanity needs to understand what is happening to us." An hour later, President Santos stood in the underground chamber, looking at Dr. Vasquez with growing concern. The scientist's appearance had changed dramatically. Her eyes now held flecks of light that moved like stars, and her skin seemed to pulse faintly with the same rhythm as the crystal formations around them. "What is happening to you, Elena?" Santos asked softly. "I am becoming what I was always meant. To be, Vasquez replied, what we were all meant to be. The Watchers did not just hide technology on our planet, Maria. They changed us. They altered human evolution so that we would eventually be able to interface directly with Earth's consciousness. Santos felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying we are not naturally evolved? We are naturally evolved, but our evolution was guided. The Watchers found Earth when it was already an ancient planetary defense system, but it was dormant because it had no biological component to guide it. So they seeded our world with genetic material designed to eventually produce a species that could serve as its consciousness. And that species is us? Yes, but the process was supposed to take much longer. The alien invasion has forced an early awakening, and our bodies are not fully prepared for the changes. As if to prove her point, Vasquez suddenly staggered, catching herself against one of the crystal formations. When she straightened, there was blood trickling from her nose. What kind of changes? Santos demanded. What is happening to our people? Enhanced reflexes, increased intelligence, intuitive understanding of physics and technology, and the ability to interface directly with Earth systems. But the human body was not designed to handle this level of neural activity. We are burning through our biological systems faster than they can repair themselves. Santos understood immediately. You're saying this is killing us. Not killing, but accelerating our aging process dramatically. A person experiencing the full enhancement might age 10 years for every year that passes. We gain incredible capabilities, but at the cost of our lifespans. Before Santos could respond, alarms began echoing through the chamber. The crystal formation suddenly blazed with light, and both women felt a sensation like the Earth itself taking a sharp breath above them. In orbit around Earth, Admiral Deathcar was discovering that his situation had just become much worse. His fleet had been trapped for 3 days, unable to escape the gravitational anomalies that surrounded the planet. Now those anomalies were moving. Report, he ordered, his 4 eyes focusing on the tactical display. Admiral, his science officer replied, his many tentacles working frantically over his instruments. The gravitational fields around Earth are shifting in patterns that suggest intelligent control. They are not random anomalies. Something is directing them. Directing them how? The fields are forming geometric patterns around our ships. It appears to be some kind of containment strategy. Zethkar studied the display, watching as invisible. Forces moved his ships like pieces on a game board. Are we in immediate danger? Unknown, sir. The forces holding us are precise enough to avoid crushing our vessels, but strong enough to prevent any escape attempts. The Admiral's tail lashed behind him as he considered his options. He had the most powerful fleet in hegemony history, and it was being held captive by a planet that should have been helpless against their technology. Open a communication channel to the planet, he ordered. The same human figure appeared on his view screen. The one with the star-filled eyes and the voice that seemed to echo from vast spaces. But now Zethkar could see that the figure was different. There were more of them, dozens of human faces surrounding the central speaker, all showing the same unnatural depth in their eyes. You return to speak with us, the central figure said. Good, we have much to discuss. Release my ships immediately, Zethkar demanded. You are holding vessels of the galactic hegemony against their will. This is an act of war. War? The figure tilted its head, and several of the surrounding faces showed expressions that might have been amusement. Admiral, you came to our system with weapons. You fired upon our world. You attempted to enslave our people. How is our defense an act of war, while your aggression is not? Zethkar felt his confidence wavering, but he pressed on. You are a primitive species. You have no right to claim sovereignty over an entire star system? Primitive? This time, the amusement in the figure's voice was unmistakable. Admiral, we are older than your civilization. Our symbiosis with this world began before your species developed tool use. We are not primitive, we are patient. The view screen changed, showing images that made Zethkar's bridge crew step backward in shock. They saw Earth as it truly was. Not a simple planet, but a vast technological construct disguised as a natural world. The continents were revealed as massive processing centers, the oceans as cooling systems for computational networks that spanned the globe. Deep beneath the surface, structures of impossible size stretched through the planet's core. This is what you attempted to conquer, the figure continued. Not a world of primitive beings, but a construct designed by a civilization that viewed stars as building materials. We are its guardians, its consciousness, its children. And you have awakened us before we were ready. Admiral Zethkar stared at the images, his military mind trying to process what he was seeing. What do you want? Nothing that you can give. U.S., the figure replied, but we will take what we need. Suddenly, every ship in the hegemony fleet experienced the same phenomenon. Their computer systems, their weapons, their life support, even their engines, all became transparent to the occupants. Alien crew members found themselves understanding technology they had used for years but never truly comprehended. They could see the flow of energy through their ship systems, feel the stress patterns in the hull, and sense the quantum fluctuations in their faster-than-light drives, but the knowledge came with a price. Across the fleet, medical officers reported that crew members were aging at an accelerated rate. Hair grayed, reflexes slowed, and lifespans compressed as their enhanced awareness burned through their biological systems. On the flagship, Admiral Zethkar felt the changes beginning in his own body. His 4 eyes could now see energy patterns, invisible to normal vision, and his mind raced with understanding of technologies he had taken for granted. But he could also feel his life force draining away like water through a broken container. What have you done to us? He gasped. Given you the same gift we have given ourselves, the figure on the screen replied. Enhanced awareness, but at the cost of time. Your crew now understands your technology as we understand ours. They can see the true nature of the universe around them, but their biology, like ours, cannot sustain this level of consciousness indefinitely. Zethkar realized with growing horror that his entire fleet was now composed of beings whose lifespans had been drastically shortened. This is murder. No, the figure said gently, this is evolution. Your people came here to harvest our resources and enslave our population. Instead, they have become part of something larger. They are no longer just crew members on ships. They are components in a vast network of consciousness that spans this entire solar system. The Admiral looked around his bridge and saw that his crew members were moving with new precision and understanding. They operated their stations not by reading instruments, but by feeling the ship's systems directly. Their efficiency had increased dramatically, but their eyes held the same star-filled depths that marked the humans on the communication screen. You are turning us into you, he whispered. We are turning you into what you could be, the figure corrected. What all biological life could be, given the right circumstances. But the process has costs, and those costs multiply when it is forced rather than chosen. Back on Earth, the changes were accelerating. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell landed her fighter on the deck of the orbital station Aurora, moving her ship through maneuvers that should have been impossible for human reflexes. But when she climbed out of the cockpit, her hands were shaking and her face showed stress lines that had not been there a week ago. How old are you, Mitchell? Captain Rodriguez asked when he saw her. 26, sir, she replied, though she looked closer to 30-5. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Similar reports were coming from across the human fleet? Enhanced capabilities were appearing everywhere, but they came with accelerated aging that no medical treatment could slow. In the underground chamber, Dr. Vasquez felt the weight of Earth's consciousness pressing against her mind. Through the network, she could perceive not just the solar system, but hints of vast structures beyond. The Watchers had not just prepared Earth as a single planetary defense. They had created a network of such worlds, each one designed to activate when faced with threats too large for conventional warfare. Maria, she said to President Santos, her voice now carrying harmonics from deep within the Earth, the hegemony fleet is just the beginning. Their home worlds will send larger forces when they realize what has happened here. We need to be ready. How do we prepare for something like that? Vasquez turned to face the president, and Santos saw that her eyes now held not just flecks of starlight, but entire galaxies spinning in miniature. "We complete the awakening," she said. "We accept what we are becoming, even knowing the cost. Because the alternative is the extinction of not just humanity, but every free species in this part of the galaxy." Santos felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. Around them, the crystal formations pulsed with increasing intensity, and somewhere far below, ancient systems continued their awakening. The choice was no longer whether to fight or surrender. The choice was whether to embrace transformation or face annihilation. And in the depths of space, sensitive instruments on distant worlds began detecting gravitational waves that carried a message written in the fundamental forces of the universe. The message was simple but unmistakable. Something that had slept for 50,000 years was waking up, and it was not pleased with what it found. 2 weeks after the awakening began, Admiral Zethkar received a message that filled him with both relief and dread. The Galactic Council had responded to his distress signals by assembling the largest military force in their history. 3,000 ships were now approaching the Sol system, led by the Council's most powerful dreadnought, the Star Crusher. But Admiral Zethkar was no longer the same being who had confidently invaded Earth's orbit. The changes forced upon him and his crew had continued to accelerate. His once sharp military mind now operated on levels that made tactical planning feel like child's play, but his body was failing. His scales had dulled, his movements had slowed, and his 4 eyes could barely focus on objects that were not illuminated by the strange energies he could now perceive everywhere. "Admiral," his communication officer reported, his voice carrying the same exhaustion that marked all the fleet's crew, "the Council Armada is requesting status updates." Zethkar looked around his bridge, seeing his crew members moving with the enhanced precision that had become normal, but also noting how much older they all appeared. "Put me through to Fleet Commander Vextara." The holographic image that appeared showed a massive insectoid being whose carapace gleamed with the dark metal of military augmentations. Commander Vextara had led successful campaigns against dozens of resistant worlds, and her reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary throughout the galaxy. "Admiral Zethkar," she began, her translator converting her clicking speech into standard galactic, "your reports make little sense. You claim to be held captive by gravitational anomalies created by a primitive species?" "Commander," Zethkar replied, forcing his aging voice to remain steady, "the situation here is unlike anything in our tactical databases. The humans are not what they appear to be. Their planet is not what it appears to be. I strongly recommend you halt your approach and request additional support." Vextara's compound eyes reflected what her species used to express contempt. "Admiral, you have been trapped by a species that barely achieved faster-than-light travel 6 months ago. I am bringing 3,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Whatever tricks they are using will not work against a force of this magnitude." The communication ended before Zethkar could respond. He slumped in his command chair, feeling the weight of knowledge that his fellow officers could not comprehend. Through his enhanced perception, he could see the Council Armada approaching, but he could also see something else. The space around? Earth was changing again, preparing for a conflict on a scale that even the massive approaching fleet could not imagine. In the depths of Earth's oceans, Dr. Elena Vasquez floated in a chamber that had risen from the deepest trenches of the Pacific. The chamber was filled with a liquid that allowed her to breathe while maintaining perfect electrical conductivity with the planet's neural network. Her human body had aged decades in the past 2 weeks, but her mind had expanded to encompass awareness that spanned light years. Through the network, she could perceive the approaching Council fleet as clearly as if she were standing on their bridge decks. 3,000 ships, each one capable of destroying worlds, all moving toward Earth with the confidence of an overwhelming force. But she could also perceive Earth's response to this threat. The planet was no longer just awakening, it was preparing. For war got deep beneath the continents, structures the size of cities were rising through the Earth's crust. In the asteroid belt, rocks that had drifted peacefully for millions of years suddenly began moving with purpose, forming geometric patterns that defied orbital mechanics. Jupiter's massive gravity well started fluctuating in ways that created ripples throughout the entire solar system. President Santos, Vasquez spoke through the communication network, her voice now carrying harmonics from the planet's core. The final phase is beginning. Earth is about to reveal what it truly is. In the government bunker, President Santos listened to reports from around the world that painted a picture of transformation beyond anything in human experience. Cities were reporting that their foundations were shifting as underground structures pushed upward. The ocean levels were dropping as vast amounts of water were being absorbed into previously unknown cavities. And everywhere, the enhanced humans who had accepted the symbiosis were reporting visions of something immense stirring to life. How many of our people have undergone the full transformation? Santos asked General Harrison, who himself now moved. With the precise efficiency of the enhanced, but bore the physical cost in his graying hair and lined face. Approximately 40 million people worldwide have made direct contact with the network, Harrison reported. They have gained incredible capabilities, but their aging has accelerated dramatically. Our medical teams estimate that most of them will have normal lifespans of only 10 to 15 more years. Santos felt the weight of that sacrifice. 40 million people had essentially given their lives to become components in Earth's defense system. But she was beginning to understand that without their sacrifice, there would be no human lives left to preserve. And the alien fleet in our orbit, completely integrated into the network. They no longer function as separate entities but as part of Earth's consciousness. Admiral Zethkar has requested permission to send a warning to the approaching fleet, but he can no longer disobey Earth's directives. Santos nodded grimly. Let him send his warning. They deserve a chance to understand what they are facing. High above Earth, Admiral Zethkar composed what he knew would be his final message as an independent being. His integration with Earth's network was nearly complete, and soon his individual consciousness would be absorbed into something vastly larger. Fleet Commander Vextara, he transmitted, I am sending you tactical data about what you are approaching. Please study it carefully before you continue your attack. The data package that accompanied his message contained everything the trapped hegemony fleet had learned about Earth's true nature. Sensor readings showing the planet's artificial structure, gravitational measurements that revealed the solar system was being manipulated as a single massive weapon, and biological data about the transformation affecting every living being within Earth's influence. Commander Vextara received the transmission as her fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune. She studied the data with her tactical analysts, expecting to find evidence of some new human technology that could be countered with superior firepower. What she found, instead, challenged everything she understood about warfare and planetary defense. These readings cannot be accurate, she told her science officer, a crystalline being whose species had mastered physics centuries before most others. Achieve space travel? I have verified the data multiple times, Commander, the science officer replied, his internal light flickering with uncertainty. If these measurements are correct, the planet Earth is not a natural world. It is an artificial construct designed as a planetary defense system of unprecedented scale. And these gravitational readings? They suggest that the entire solar system is being manipulated as a weapon. The gas giants are being used as gravitational anchors. The asteroid belt has been converted into kinetic projectiles. And even the star itself shows signs of being influenced by external control? Vextara stared at the data, her military mind, trying to process what she was seeing. How is this possible? The humans achieved faster than light travel only months ago. The data suggests that the humans are not the creators of this system, but rather its biological interface. The technology appears to be millions of years old, far predating any known galactic civilization. Before Vextara could respond, her navigation officer reported something that made the entire bridge fall silent. Commander, we are detecting massive gravitational distortions ahead. Space itself appears to be moving. On the main view screen, the fleet could see something that violated every law of physics they understood. The vacuum of space was rippling like water, with waves of distortion moving outward from the inner solar system. Stars were bending there, light around invisible obstacles, and the fabric of reality itself seemed to be under intelligent control. "All ships emergency stop," Vextara ordered. "Do not proceed any closer to the system." But as her fleet attempted to halt their advance, they discovered that stopping was no longer an option. The gravitational distortions had created a current in spacetime itself, pulling them inexorably toward Earth. 3,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships found themselves caught in a trap that used the fundamental forces of the universe as its mechanism. On Earth, the final transformation was beginning. Dr. Vasquez, floating in her chamber deep beneath the Pacific, felt her consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of her individual mind. Through the network, she could perceive every human who had joined the symbiosis, every alien crew member who had been integrated, and the vast intelligence that was Earth itself awakening to its full potential. The planet was no longer hiding its true nature. Across the continents, massive structures broke through the surface, revealing technology that made galactic civilization look primitive by comparison. The oceans drained into vast mechanical systems that had been concealed beneath the seafloor for millions of years. And in orbit around Earth, space itself began to reorganize according to geometric patterns that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, now appearing middle-aged despite being chronologically 26, piloted her fighter through space that responded to her thoughts rather than her controls. Around her, the enhanced human pilots moved their ships in formations that created interference patterns in the fabric of reality itself. "This is incredible," she transmitted to her squadron, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the cosmic forces around them. "I can feel every ship in the Council fleet. I can sense their fear as they realize what they are facing." Through the network, every enhanced human could perceive the approaching Council armada. 3,000 ships that had seemed invincible now appeared as fragile bubbles floating in an ocean of controlled gravitational forces. Earth had become more than a planet. It had become a weapon that used stars as ammunition and galaxies as its battlefield. Commander Vextara's fleet found itself trapped in gravitational currents that moved them like leaves in a cosmic wind. Their weapons were useless against forces that existed on scales beyond conventional warfare. When they fired their most powerful particle beams, the energy was absorbed into the fabric of space itself and redirected harmlessly away from Earth. "Commander," her science officer reported, his internal light now pulsing with what could only be described as terror, the gravitational distortions are increasing. It appears that the star system itself is beginning to move." Vextara looked at her instruments and saw readings that made no sense. The Sun, Earth, and all the planets were maintaining their relative positions, but the entire solar system was beginning to accelerate through space, not by using engines or any technology she could understand, but by manipulating the gravitational fields of nearby stars. "Where is it going?" she asked. "Based on the trajectory," the science officer replied, "directly toward the galactic core, toward the Council homeworlds." The realization hit Vextara like a physical blow. Earth was not just defending itself. It was preparing to take the war directly to the heart of galactic civilization. The sleeping giant that the ancient warnings had spoken of was not just awakening. It was preparing to reshape the entire galaxy according to its own design. And across the vast distances between stars, sensitive instruments began detecting gravitational waves that carried a message older than civilization itself. The message was simple but unmistakable. Something that had slept for millions of years was fully awake now, and it was very, very angry. The journey to the galactic core took 18 days, but it was unlike any travel in the history of spaceflight. Earth did not use engines or faster-than-light drives. Instead, it reached out with gravitational fields that spanned dozens of star systems, pulling itself through space by grasping the fabric of reality itself. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now more energy than flesh, existed within the heart of Earth's consciousness as the planet moved between stars. Through the network, she could perceived the terror spreading throughout galactic civilization as their instruments detected something impossible approaching. A planet traveling faster than light without any visible means of propulsion, dragging an entire solar system in its wake, the Council's homeworld of Galactic Prime orbited a binary star system that had been the center of civilization for over 10,000 years. It was here that representatives from 1,000,000 worlds gathered to govern the galaxy. The planet itself was a marvel of engineering, with cities that floated in the upper atmosphere and space elevators that reached into orbit, but as Earth approached, the leaders of the Galactic Council discovered that all their technology meant nothing against forces that operated on cosmic scales. Supreme Chancellor Morthic, the elected leader of the Council, stood in the Great Assembly Hall watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. The ancient being had ruled for 3 centuries, guiding galactic civilization through wars, plagues, and natural disasters. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for what was approaching his homeworld. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed by entire star systems. General Kextara, the military coordinator and sister to the missing Fleet Commander Vextara, stepped forward. Her insectoid features were tense with barely controlled anxiety. "Supreme Chancellor, the object continues to approach. Our deep space sensors confirm it is the planet called Earth, but it has been completely transformed. The gravitational signature suggests artificial enhancement on a scale we cannot comprehend. And our fleets? All 3,000 ships under my sister's command appear to be traveling with the Earth system. We are receiving no communications from them, but sensor readings suggest the vessels are intact." Chancellor Morthic's ancient eyes focused on the tactical display that showed Earth's approach. "How long until it arrives in our system?" "At its current velocity, 6 hours. The Chancellor looked around the assembly hall, which was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Beings of every conceivable shape and size, united in their growing fear of what was coming toward them. "Evacuate the planet," he ordered. "Sir?" General Kextara's compound eyes reflected confusion. "Evacuate Galactic Prime? That is impossible. We have over 50 billion inhabitants across the planet and its orbital stations." "Then evacuate who we can and prepare for the unthinkable," Morthic replied grimly. "We are about to discover what the ancient warnings really meant." As Earth entered the Galactic Prime system, its presence immediately began affecting everything around it. The binary stars that had burned steadily for billions of years started fluctuating as their gravitational fields were influenced by forces beyond their understanding. The carefully maintained orbital patterns of planets and space stations began to shift as space-time itself bent around the approaching world. On Earth's surface, humanity had completed its transformation. President Santos, now appearing ancient despite being only in her 50s, stood in the command center that had once been the Swiss Alps. The mountains had been absorbed into Earth's structure, becoming part of a vast computational network that spanned the planet around her. The enhanced humans who had survived the transformation worked at stations that existed in more than 3 dimensions. They no longer needed displays or instruments interfacing directly with Earth's consciousness to guide its actions. Their individual personalities had not been lost, but they had become part of something immeasurably larger. "We are approaching the Council homeworld," reported General Harrison, his voice carrying harmonics from deep within Earth's core. "All systems are responding perfectly." Santos nodded, feeling through the network the presence of every human who had joined the symbiosis. 40 million minds working as one, guiding a weapon that could reshape galaxies. Open communications with their leadership. Let us see if they are ready to listen. In the Council Assembly Hall, every screen suddenly displayed the same image. It was a human figure, but one that seemed to contain the depths of space itself. When it spoke, its voice resonated through the hall with frequencies that made the building itself vibrate. "Leaders of the Galactic Council," the figure began, "I am Elena Vasquez, speaking for the consciousness of Earth and the collective will of humanity. You have ignored the warnings left by the Watchers. You have attempted to conquer and enslave. Now you will face the consequences of your actions. Chancellor Morthic stepped forward, drawing upon centuries of diplomatic experience. Dr. Vasquez, I presume, we are prepared to negotiate. Surely we can reach an understanding that avoids unnecessary conflict. Unnecessary? The figure's expression showed something that might have been amusement. Chancellor, your fleets invaded our system without provocation. Your forces attempted to enslave our people and steal our resources. You dismissed ancient warnings as primitive superstition. What part of your aggression was necessary? We were expanding galactic civilization, Morthic replied, though his voice carried less conviction than usual. Bringing primitive worlds into the community of advanced species, by force. By conquest, by treating other beings as resources to be harvested. The figure shook its head sadly. The Watchers left warnings about us because they understood what we truly are. We are not just another species to be catalogued and controlled. We are the guardians of something much older and more powerful than your civilization. On the main view screen, the Assembly could now see Earth itself as it hung in space near their homeworld. But it was no longer the blue and green planet that had appeared in their databases. Instead, it pulsed with energies that made it appear more like a living star than a world. Continents had been reshaped into vast geometric patterns, and the oceans had become reservoirs of liquid energy that powered systems beyond comprehension. What do you want? Chancellor Morthic asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Change, Dr. Vasquez replied simply. For millions of years, galactic civilization has been built on the principle that might makes right. Stronger species conquer weaker ones. Advanced worlds exploit primitive ones. Resources are taken by force from those who cannot defend them. That is the natural order, General Kekstara interjected. The strong survive and prosper while the weak serve or perish. Natural? The figure on the screen turned its attention to the general, and for a moment Kekstara felt as if she were being examined by forces that could see into her very soul. There's nothing natural about using superior technology to enslave others. Nothing natural about treating entire species as property. The Watchers understood this, which is why they created us. The image changed, showing the Assembly a view of the galaxy that revealed patterns invisible to normal perception. Lines of force connected star systems, forming a vast network that spanned the entire galactic disk. Earth is not the only world. The Watchers prepared. Dr. Vasquez continued. Throughout the galaxy there are other sleeping guardians, other worlds that wait for the day when the balance must be restored. Your aggression has awakened not just us, but them as well. Chancellor Morthic stared at the display, seeing dozens of star systems beginning to show the same gravitational anomalies that surrounded Earth. How many? Enough. The Watchers seeded guardian worlds throughout the galaxy, each one designed to activate when galactic civilization became too aggressive, too exploitative. You have triggered the awakening of them all. The implications hit the Assembly like a physical blow. If Earth's power was representative of what these other worlds could do, then galactic civilization as they knew it was about to end. What are your terms? Morthic asked, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. Dissolution of the hegemony? An end to forced expansion and conquest. The establishment of a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than domination. Dr. Vasquez's image became more solid, more present. Species will be free to develop according to their own nature. Worlds will not be invaded for their resources. The strong will protect the weak rather than exploit them. And if we refuse? The figure smiled, and for a moment the Assembly could see the vast intelligence behind those human features. Chancellor, you are not in a position to refuse. Your military forces are now part of our network. Your homeworld exists only because we allow it. Your entire civilization continues only by our sufferance. To demonstrate the point, Earth's gravitational field suddenly intensified, causing every object in the galactic prime system to shift slightly in their orbits. The effect lasted only seconds, but the message was clear. Earth could destroy everything in the system simply by adjusting its gravitational output. However, Dr. Vasquez continued. We do not wish to destroy what has been built. Galactic civilization has achieved wonders. Science, art, philosophy, the peaceful cooperation of millions of species. These things are worth preserving. We seek transformation, not annihilation. Chancellor Morthic looked around the assembly hall, seeing fear and resignation in the faces of representatives from across the galaxy. What guarantees do we have that you will not simply become new tyrants, ruling through superior force? The same guarantee the Watchers built into us, the figure replied. We are bound by our nature to protect rather than conquer. Our enhancement comes at the cost of shortened lifespans, ensuring that power does not become concentrated in immortal hands. And most importantly, we do not seek to rule. We seek only to ensure that the galaxy becomes a place where all species can flourish, according to their own nature. The negotiation continued for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. Earth's demonstration of power had made it clear that resistance was impossible. The Galactic Council formally dissolved the hegemony and agreed to establish a new form of government based on cooperation rather than conquest. Admiral Zethkar, his consciousness now fully integrated with Earth's network, transmitted a final message to his homeworld. The age of conquest is over, he said, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had seen beyond the limitations of individual existence. The age of cooperation begins now, as Earth prepared to return to its home system, carrying with it the former hegemony fleet that would now serve as ambassadors to the new galactic order. Dr. Vasquez felt a deep satisfaction flowing through the network. Humanity had fulfilled its purpose, becoming the guardians the Watchers had designed them to be. The cost had been enormous. Millions of enhanced humans would live shortened lives, their biology burned out by the power they channeled. But in exchange, the galaxy would become a place where species could develop freely, where the strong protected the weak, and where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Earth began its journey home, no longer just a planet but a living symbol of what cooperation between consciousness and cosmic forces could achieve. Behind it, across the galaxy, other guardian worlds stirred from their ancient sleep, ready to ensure that the new order would endure. The Earthborn Titan had awakened, the stars had trembled, and the galaxy would never be the same.